right. Well, welcome everyone to our Next Economy Living free introduction and question and answer session. My name is Erin, she, her pronouns, and I'm calling in from unceded Ohlone territory in the San Pablo Creek watershed, which is a tributary to the San Francisco Bay. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to just pass to Kevin to introduce as well.
Hi there, Kevin Bayou Key Him, also a worker owner at Lyft Economy. I'm zooming in from unceded Coast Miwok territory, otherwise known as the area Mill Valley, California, just north of San Francisco.
So our agenda for our time together is just first to spend maybe 5 to 7 minutes kind of introducing what Next Economy Living is and why we did it. And I have a few slides that I'll share. And then really to focus the bulk of our time on interactive questions with the folks that are participating. And we have about 7 questions that were preceded that we will address as well. And so hopefully that can give folks a sense of, what this course is about, why we chose to launch it, and yeah, and kind of whether it's a good fit for you. So I think that with that, I will share a little bit deeper an introduction of why this particular topic area is so meaningful to me and why I'm honored to be a co-facilitator alongside Kevin of this program. Um, and I was just kind of reflecting on it for for another media article interview. Before my tenure at Lyft Economy, I was deeply involved in education, sustainability education. I was helping neighborhoods install gray water systems, working with cities to develop programs so that folks could redirect their landscape water, hi Hannah, hi Carrie, from their washing machines out into their landscapes, out into their yards, putting in rainwater catchment, formulating alternative currencies. And I was doing all this stuff. And I came to the conclusion that everyone who was participating in this nonprofit endeavor was doing it kind of as a hobby or on the side. It was kind of marginalized from their day-to-day 9 to 5 existence. And I was really disheartened by that. And that's what led me to Lyft Economy, was really I wanted these strategies to be lifted up as viable escape routes from the traps of capitalism and actually to be recognized as like serious alternatives to the way we live. And it's come into clearer and clearer focus the more I've learned through the arc of my career. And I'll give just one example, and then I'm going to pass to Kevin, which is that currently there's a sobering reality in that $44 trillion currently is in US retirement savings accounts. And a lot of that is being invested paradoxically in a future that's undermining a livable future to retire to. Things like surveillance, weapons, defense, extractive mining, etc. And without going too far down that sobering reality, if we think about living our lives according to the normative behaviors that we've inherited of, going into deep educational debt and buying a house and, paying for all our food needs and all these things. Yes, we need $550,000 when we retire to just sustain our basic needs. But if we can invest in alternative living strategies while we are before the age of retirement, that number can actually drop from 550,000 to 70,000, even down to 0. And that's a part of what inspires me around Next Economy Living is like this collective endeavor to normalize alternative living strategies, support one another, etc. So I'll just leave it there by way of bio. I hope that was helpful at all to give a window into something that I'm really passionate about And I'll pass to Kevin to share a little bit about the facilitation that he brings to this course.
Sure, thanks, Erin. Maybe I'll share a little bit about the why, my why related to Next Economy Living. At Lift Economy, some of you might know we do things like we have other learning experiences, Next Economy MBA. We work with a lot of emerging institutions around Next Economy, providing needed goods and services to their communities, but in ways that are distinct and different from the norms and structures of the business as usual racialized capitalism economy. And so we work with a lot of worker-owned cooperatives, multi-stakeholder cooperatives, perpetual purpose trusts, worker self-directed nonprofits, some impact investors and philanthropic groups, and just explore all the different models for ways in which communities can meet their needs. And it's really exciting work, and it's happening all over the world, not fast enough, but it's happening. And there's a reality that hits home for me is that if we were successful and tomorrow every institution, every business, every corporation, every goods and service provider in the world were like the most groovy, multi-stakeholder, cooperative, inclusive governance, regenerative operations type business, we would still be on a trajectory to self-termination. Nature is in crisis. We've passed 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries. There's something, unfortunately, in the shadow in basic affluent world culture of consumption, and it's nobody's fault. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. There's just literally now nearly $1 trillion, but let's use hundreds of billions of dollars industry that is intent on understanding human psychology and our weaknesses and manufacturing demands, so that in the affluent world, where, like Erin said, the strategies that are presented to us when you're born is to consume your way to well-being. And that pattern of consumption, even if you swap out the institutions that are providing those goods, it's not adequate to a livable future. It's not commensurate with a livable future. We actually have to change at a cultural level. And that's a sticky challenge because there's very few places, as far as I could tell, where that conversation and learning from, because it's really hard, to like opt out of, buying food with money. So to opt into growing some of your own food, or to opt out of paying for housing with cash and opt into some type of commons, co-living ownership, stewardship kind of models, to opt out of using energy for transportation or even entertainment or other endeavors, and opt into different strategies for meeting our needs for enjoyment, enjoying each other and community and loving relationships. They're fraught, they're challenged, they're culturally invisible. People are doing them. I assume many of the people on this call are doing things in their life, but where's the support system? Where's the conversation about how do I take that next step with, whether it's conserving energy or building in food resilience or water resilience or housing resilience, or there's weird stuff in culture of there's the tiny home movement, or we glorify the one person who is able to live a year with no trash other than what can fit in a 1-gallon jar, or we have these heroic examples, which I think are important. There's a whole thing even decluttering and Marie Kondo and minimalism is this weird co-opted. There's a bunch of things that are just out in the zeitgeist in culture that are pointing towards transforming our living, but there's nothing that's, as far as we found, was holistic and kind of looking at all aspects of our life and having some structure and support system to it. So for me, Next Economy Living it's an experiment. I think it's an imperative for us to figure out ways to transform culture to navigate to a livable future. But I don't know how to do it. And I've learned a lot of things over the years. And what I do know is that by sharing what we're doing together and being vulnerable enough to have a place where we can say, this is where I'm stuck. I'm not sure what my next step is with reducing material use. I'm not sure what my next step is to go plastic free. I'm not sure what my next step is to food security and growing my own food. I'm not sure how to transform my housing. I'm not sure what my next step in transforming my financial circumstance to be benefiting the long-term livable future and reliable prosperity for everybody. If we're humble enough to like say that in a group of people, I found it in the Next Economy Living cohort 1 to be extraordinarily generative, where a lot of ideas and support and sharing has emerged, where people are taking, in some cases, small actions, in some cases, profound actions in terms of transforming their life. So we've collected hundreds of resources and a framework to navigate this journey together as a community rather than having to do it by ourselves, which most people who try and endeavor to change their life find themselves isolated, sometimes even from their own family or significant other. And so that's why I'm here, is to see if there's a growing need for, or if there's an attractor for people to say like, yeah, I'm in this with you. Let's do it together.
So I want to just pause there. We're going to share slides and do a little bit of presentation, but did that elicit any questions or responses or thoughts from the folks that are live on the call right now? We just want to give a moment for you to presence what's alive for you. And if there's anything else that you'd want to share in response to what Kevin and I just shared. And thank you to those that just joined. Welcome. Thank you, Claire. So some of the topics, particularly housing and retirement, really resonated. Okay, wonderful. Glad that was useful. And folks are welcome to share in the chat where they're calling in from, and any questions. And also feel free to make this as interactive as feels right for you at the moment. Stop us, unmute yourself, come on video so we can see your face and interact, because we really want to make this useful for you. So Hannah's saying, interested to hear more about what folks involved in this space are learning about elder care. Thank you, Hannah. What a great provocation. And maybe, Kevin, that makes me think about some of the case stories that we've come across through our work with entrepreneurs around models of elder care that could be in response to some of the things we're bringing up.
I mean, one thing I could share, Hannah, is like, it's a great question because it reminds me of the bigger context of one of the reasons why it's so difficult in kind of the culture of business as usual to take actions to navigate our lives through a life design to be more generative, as each of us has particular circumstances. Some of us have obligations and duties, chosen or not chosen, around childcare or elder care. Some of us have, just to meet basic needs like shelter and food, are finding ourselves working 2-3 jobs at a time with almost no time affluence to invest in research or finding other alternative strategies. So anything that's alternative becomes really fraught depending on our circumstance. One of our posits with Next Economy Living is that there's probably no prescription of like, here are the steps to design your life, to make your life work. There's no prescription that is right for everybody. And we also believe that probably it's true for everybody, no matter one's privilege or positionality, that each person probably does have another step to take. And so I'm not sure what that step is. It's going to be different for each person. In terms of like strategies around elder care, that sounds like a really juicy topic that would come up in Next Economy Living when we talk about our different aspects of that. We, like Erin said, from an institutional level, we have seen different type of structures around elder care. that we could talk about in terms of oftentimes it's like grouping. One of the really tragic things in society is that we kind of segregate elders and youth from each other. And some of the most impressive models we've seen are where elders and youth are integrated into the same setting. So where elders, even in cohabitation models, are living either proximally or with children and providing some of the childcare and that deep integration, which helps with intergenerational transfer. Sometimes it creates degrees of freedom for the adults who are neither children nor elders, who can leverage the collective elder care for the child care. It's not always true and it doesn't always work, but we've seen some of that institutional design around elder care. Also in the next economy living, there's a lot of discussion around mutual aid, finding non-commodified, non-cash ways to develop a community of support. So one thing I know from one of my dear friends and mentors and allies, coworkers, a person named Pandora Thomas, whose mother has recently passed, but she spent the last decade and a half, 2 decades of her life caring for her mother as her mother became less and less cognitively able from dementia and other Alzheimer's. And the what I noticed with Pandora's lived experience is that when it was something that she had to do alone, it was extraordinarily oppressive and challenging. When she had mutual support and found reciprocal relationships where other people in the community could take turns in providing some elder care, and then in return she would provide other services or goods to other people in some type of reciprocal web of relationships, that it became much more doable, maybe even joyful and rewarding for everybody involved. Oh, but those are words that are really easy to say, and like it's easy for me to say those words. Oh yeah, just get those relationships going, and the mutual aid and exchange. A lot of times in next economy living, there's words and ideas, but it doesn't mean that they're actionable or appropriate for one circumstance. So there's this humbling and vulnerable place of like, how can we share what our needs are and explore strategies together without imposing of like, yeah, this is the way you do it or something like that. Like it's what a tricky thing to be able to ask for advice and support in a place where it could be held without some type of command and control impositional framework that just doesn't work for you. So thank you, Hannah, for that question about elder care. And I wish I had better answers. I wish I had answers. I feel like for me, it's like I don't even have answers, but I know what I feel confident about is that it's the type of question that I feel is a really appropriate question for next economy living, because for somebody to hold that question for themselves alone, I have to imagine is extraordinarily challenging and potentially paralyzing.
Yeah, and also to hold that question alone in a business as usual economy that chronically marginalizes, creative community-based response and prioritizes, oh, just, pay to put your elder in a home, just, like that's what people profit from. So, as opposed to a community that actually recognizes the value of taking control back into our own hands, which kind of brings me to unless there's any other question that's right alive with folks right this moment, and please stop me at any time if there is. It kind of brings me to just brief, I'm hoping this can be like 5 or 7 minutes, why did we create Next Economy Living? And we've sort of unpacked a few aspects that drew us to this, but just to make it crystal clear, the current economy is not working for any of us. So why Next Economy Living we've been working, Lift Economy, the bulk of our time is spent working with social enterprises, working with B Corps, working with cooperatives, and we've worked with them for over a decade, hundreds of organizations at this point. And one piece that has come up as a theme and a consistent thread is that the decisions that entrepreneurs make and the context and positionality that entrepreneurs are embedded in has really big implications for their ability to create thriving, sustainable business models. So in our MBA course, we have one session on personal life design. We've heard time and time again that it's wholly inadequate, that we need to have another space for folks to go deeper and support one another around this personal life design. And it's not just about individual choice, it's about creating a culture that supports people to have alternative living strategies that really are in alignment with Next Economy principles and values. Kevin, anything to add on that before I keep going? Okay.
No, please keep going.
And at the same time, the individual consumption patterns and the living patterns, particularly for the global minority, the kind of global affluent world, are playing an outsized role in stretching the limits of Earth's resources. So we also believe that, if we waved a magic wand and every company today became a B Corp, it would be just wholly inadequate for having a resilient climate and a resilient future. And so we believe it's quite consequential that we transform affluent world consumption patterns. But it's not all of right? So it's individual and collective consumption patterns comprise a portion of the system's change toward the next economy. Of course, we cannot turn a blind eye towards systemic factors that are exacerbating wealth inequality and sort of the movement building component. And context, privilege, positionality all play a role in influencing kind of what strategies are available to any given person. And so that's why our aspiration with Next Economy Living is really to cultivate a space where there's enough spaciousness and nuance to bring the compassionate, Kevin, the like non-judgmental, compassionate, supportive, curious space. That's something we've already found has been incredibly rich in our first cohort, and we want to continue to bring that through subsequent cohorts. Kevin, anything to add to that? Okay. And I guess the kind of last thing I'll say about this is that the kind of, and I'll stop my share for a moment here, the trend that we've seen that to be most common because of the kind of omnipresence of the business as usual economy, the trend to kind of like overcome the isolation, the scarcity embedded in the business as usual economy is that a lot of cultures globally that have intact gift economy, mutual aid, we might consider it the global majority, folks that are actually meeting their needs outside of the financialization, that there's this dynamic that either it becomes quite marginalized, that there's an encounter with the business as usual economy that sometimes by dominance or war or colonialism or conflict, and that so there's this nuance where it's not so much that one or two communities have it all figured out, or there's this perfect place that is, having a non-financialized way of living, but really that in order to get to a next economy, there needs to be this kind of co-creation or co-discovery of how do all of us, given the circumstances we find ourselves in and the particular context of this planetary moment, reclaim aspects of the non-financialized or the more than financialized economy that is appropriate, culturally relevant, and appropriate for this time. So I think with that, I'll just leave it there. That was a lot I just shared with you all, and see what's coming up for folks, or thoughts or comments or questions. And I think we will go into the Q&A momentarily. Maybe one other thing before we go into Q&A, if there's not something right live, I'll just share a couple frameworks that we use in the course that can kind of help people make sense of how to be in this space of co-creation, self-reflection, community reflection on personal life design. And one is called the Next Step framework. So let me just share my screen. Kevin, is there anything you would want to say before you have to go? I know you're gonna drop off and celebrate your daughter's graduation today, so congrats to her.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. Yeah, and I apologize that I do have to leave a little bit early. What Erin's about to share about different frameworks. So there are frameworks and tools that we're kind of co-creating together. So there are things that we've developed over time, but also that have already been informed by the first cohort in the Next Economy Living kind of community. And I assume they're going to continue to evolve. And there's probably other tools and frameworks that we don't know about that some of you might be using. And it's also not really all about the tools and frameworks. One thing that we start with, that from our lived experience about people endeavoring to change their habits, behaviors, and norms, or their life design and how they relate to money or their needs, food, water, shelter, material, community, even things like entertainment, that the tools and having some structure is sometimes usually helpful, to have some kind of tool or structure. And we go through various forms and options of those tools. To have no structure for change can potentially work, but it can be difficult. But structure alone can be oppressive. Structure alone is not enough. So we often talk about structure and support. Support being the group of humans that you're connecting with to help navigate choices, create options, discover possibilities, meet other people. The humans are the support system, is the essential component, and oftentimes, frankly, more important than the structure. And we do believe that some form of a balance is valuable. So having some structure, not zero, but really emphasizing the support and mutual aid. So Erin, I'll probably drop in about 5 minutes, but if you want to go in and share some of them.
Yeah, just to build off of that and kind of segue from that structure and support framework to this Next Step framework, I'll bring in actually an outcome from this last cohort. So one of our participants identified for themselves that their next step was they wanted to reduce their sugar intake pretty dramatically. And they kind of posited that to our cohort, and almost instantaneously, folks had really creative strategies for them around how to counter a very strongly held influential industry, right? The sugar industry has very strong incentives to encourage us to consume as much refined sugar as humanly possible, as much of the day as possible. And through the cohort, they've actually been able to pretty dramatically reduce their sugar intake just through support and creative strategies. And it aligns with this framework that we have around. So we've kind of broken the course up into different modules: food resilience, personal health and mental well-being, water resilience, energy, material, financial resilience, housing resilience, and then technology education. But we start with the principles of personal life design first as our launching off point. And then for each of those kind of categories, we have this kind of a possibility of steps. And ideally, this would be a very fancy diagram that would be circular and it would move as I presented it. It would be non-linear. And apologies for the confines of using a spreadsheet to try and emulate this. We also present it in a PowerPoint or a Google Slides spreadsheet as well. But for example, reducing sugar consumption wasn't really a step that we might have it somewhere, but it was just one potential step. We have other steps for food resilience, like researching basic nutrition, assessing our current diet, and setting a vision for improved health and nutrition, or identifying space to grow food, or joining a crop swap, or um, buying in bulk, or trying solar cooking. So there's sort of this plethora of different steps, and the framework is really intended not to be prescriptive by any means, but to offer inspiration and engagement for folks to realize that no matter where you are in your personal life, we all have access to a next step, like a deepening of the ways in which we're relating to these key categories. And that's one framework that we use throughout the course and the curriculum. Kevin, anything to add on that before we, okay. Are there any questions that are coming up for folks? Either about that framework, or I could share another framework, but I could also go to some of the preceded questions. But are there any questions coming up about the course right now that you'd like to presence?
Maybe just one quick question regarding the dynamics of like I don't want to say in person, but like when you come together, is most of the learning kind of done outside of the group, or is there like an educational component and then discussion? More of like, yeah, how is the time together used?
Yeah, great question. So we will start with that framework that I shared. Well, we start with a breakout room to just get people right away interacting with one another, and a little prompt about the topic. And over time, we may change that. We might start with like a case story instead, but we've found that the breakout room really kind of opens people up and gets them engaging right away. So we've really liked that for this cohort. And then we'll take maybe 10 to 15 minutes to go through those steps related to that topic, steps that we've preceded, that we have resources with. And then we go straight into a breakout room. And the breakout prompt typically is around like baseline assessment as it relates to this topic. How would you rank yourself and or your neighborhood in terms of where you are now versus where you'd like to be? Then that usually is about 15 to 18 minutes of a breakout room with 2 other folks. Then we'll come back together, and at that point we do a dance break, and then we do a harvest where everyone is invited to go, but anyone can pass. And folks are invited to share what came up for them in the breakout room, if a next step emerged from their self-inquiry or from the steps that were presented, or if a celebration of a previous step is warranted. And that sort of public sharing back to the group, we found to be really, really meaningful for folks, and folks get a lot of insights and inspiration from that. And then we'll sort of close with next steps. We've closed with an invitation for feedback and an invitation to go deeper in some form of extra fun that you can take on your own accord. We also have a Hilo group that is a non-Facebook platform that is nonprofit owned, privacy forward social media platform where folks can engage and share resources. And then as I mentioned, or as Kevin mentioned, that list of over 100 vetted resources that are annotated. So each of the topics comes with it, like readings and links and videos that we've intentionally curated to be to have a bit more nuance and complexity than what you might find with just a quick Google search, to support deepening our literacy and awareness around each of those topic areas. Did that answer your question?
Yes, yeah, it did. Thank you.
We try to make the sessions, they're 90-minute sessions, as engaging and interactive as possible. They are all recorded. Of course, the breakout rooms we don't record, but then the share out is recorded, and it's only shared with the current cohort. So it's not shared anywhere else but with the current cohort who is registered. And we do have a lifetime membership. So once you register, you can come back at any subsequent cohort meeting to revisit and rejoin and re-engage with that particular topic. So that's really wonderful. Maybe I'll share, someone else had asked about the times and dates for this current cohort. So we are going to start September 11th, which is a Thursday, and they're every other Thursday at 1 p.m. Pacific till 2:30 p.m. Pacific. So that's when this current cohort is going to kick off. And I mentioned kind of the homework between the session. The homework tends to, we try to avoid calling it homework. We call it extra fun. Bye, Kevin. Thank you so much for being here today. We try to invite people to try on taking a next step, identifying that next step, taking a next step. And towards the end of the sessions, we actually have, at the beginning, we talk about personal life design. At the last session is actually an opportunity for folks to go back in the round and share sort of a life design presentation. Like, as a result of the 6 months together, were there any things that really stuck out that were things that you would be interested in kind of doing or taking action on? Like, what life design tools, strategies, support systems are you going to take from this experience with you into the rest of your life? So that's a really exciting piece as well. Carrie, I'm curious, you had asked this question: how do we age gracefully in the US and help others to do so as well? I'm curious if that question is still alive for you and if you'd like us to kind of talk about it, or if you would like to add any other context to that question. If you're not in a place to unmute, that's totally fair as well, but I'd be happy to speak to that question.
Hey, Erin, thanks for taking this. I'm on my phone at the moment, and kind of walking down the street. So,
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm 63, and so this comes up a lot in discussions I have with my contemporaries, yeah, just this country just seems really difficult to age in gracefully. Not end up being reliant on, overly reliant on, family members or, other members of the community. So anyway, I know it's a pretty general question, but it is pretty general for me right now too. I'm not quite sure even how to talk about specifics around this. I mean, everything about housing and health and community and yeah, I mean, this next chapter of my life I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful question, Carrie. I appreciate you asking it, and I appreciate you sharing the elaboration. And it really reminds me of, Hannah, your question of how do we prepare for elderhood that we talked about at the beginning. But I guess one framing that I would bring in, two framings. One is that we start very intentionally, we start the course very early on with personal health and mental well-being. And that topic feels to me to be really related to this question, Carrie, because on a couple levels, you mentioned that the ways in which we design our life, like we talked about with Hannah's question around reintegrating elders, children, and adults who might not fall into either of those categories, together, synergizing the brilliances and skills that they bring. And I'm not talking about just in co-housing, but also in um, recreation activities or in cookery activities. The more instances we have of synergizing and reintegrating those populations, I think it both sets us up for, better systems for aging gracefully, as well as a big piece is that mental well-being, right? Doctors are saying that isolation is surpassing smoking as one of the greatest health risks for so-called United States. And so how do we look at personal health, aging gracefully, as not siloed from mental well-being as well? So that's one piece that comes up for me. Just checking if anyone else on this call, before I keep talking, just does anyone else on this call would like to add to what Carrie's question or chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like with my dad, I can share some more. He's in his 70s, and he's ever since COVID, but even before that, he was leading a pretty isolated life. My mom worked full time and still does. So, I guess like now that we have an Alzheimer's diagnosis, like we are looking at that full picture, like you were saying, Erin, and that's why I spoke up, is because I think that it is more than it's more than like what you eat, and it's more than the medicine that you take. It's like, look at the whole picture of how is his life. And if he's sitting by himself in the house that he's lived in, for 40 years or something, it's not great. So we've got him signed up for some community exercise classes. We're trying to figure out how to move him closer to me and my kids and my sister. And in the meantime, I connected him with a bigger community, like a friend from high school's parents that are going to the Y like 3 times a week. It's just like little things like that. And Carrie, I'm only 40, like I don't, you've got some years on me, and you probably have a completely different situation, but I guess just like looking at the whole picture for yourself and your family and everybody around, right? And trying to make it as many connections together as possible. That's what we're trying to do for my dad.
Does anyone else have thoughts to share as my daughter walks in and I need to feed her?
Hi, Ozzy.
One thought that came to mind, Carrie, as you were even speaking is, and Hannah, as even you'd put in the chat around your father, just kind of the value we place on elders, at least I would probably observe many parts of Western or American culture. And we put a relatively low value on elders in that phase of life. So yeah, that's less of a solution, if anything, but more just, I think, a challenging reflection, or a disappointed reflection. And I think we see other parts of the world view that stage of life in a very different manner.
Yeah, I was thinking along similar lines, Hannah, when you were speaking around, yeah, I can just imagine so many co-benefits of having your father engaged in other activities and, you know, having other people be in community. You know, it's like I've heard of examples where community members that are invited into a care economy actually get reciprocal benefit from that. That is kind of inquantifiable and is currently certainly marginalized by our economy, and sort of renormalizing that as yeah, what are the strengths that we each bring, as opposed to care economy being a liability.
Sorry, this is just an example of like community volunteers assisting elders with just whatever, like a walk to the drugstore or something like that. Just people with available time helping people with needs.
Yeah, and like a walk to the drugstore could get someone who's otherwise sitting behind a desk outside, enhancing their personal well-being by being outside connecting with someone, as opposed to, and it could be a simple like low-level risk or low-level lift. Additionally, this notion of like reweaving the bioregional neighborhood connectivity. And even like what you were saying around this much larger question you're holding around how to create more, how to bring them closer to your community. Like, you know, one of the modules we talk about is housing, but coming at it from a different perspective, not just, okay, how do I individually meet my housing needs, but what's a much wider spectrum of strategies around housing that are more addressing the like systemic and collective aspects of, you know, why is it that we find ourselves time and time again forwarding the nuclear family model, as opposed to the polyculture of housing strategies all over the world that are used and have been used historically, and that can be reclaimed into the future.
Thanks for sharing the resource, Deborah. Have you used it? Or like, do you have any experience with it?
No, I don't have a family member with Alzheimer's, but it was a colleague of mine. We were in some sort of cohort together a few years back. And I just remembered, you know, what she explained and how she described things. She seemed like a really intelligent and very compassionate person. So if nothing else, just checking out her resources would probably be helpful.
Thank you so much.
Oh, and that was the other piece I was going to name around the personal health and well-being being front and center. You know, we have a dance break every session. We didn't do it on the intro session, but I encourage folks to stand up if it's accessible to them and shake your body and move while you're listening to this. I love that Carrie was on a walk. But you know, so much of the business as usual economy discounts the preventative aspects of health and well-being. And so, you know, when Carrie brought up this question of how do we age gracefully, we do have one section on personal health and well-being, but I would say it definitely is held as a theme throughout each of the sessions. And there's this building on each other that happens through each of the modules, where when we're talking about energy resilience and you know, bike powered energy generation, that ties back into that personal health module. And so being a part of a community that normalizes preventative investments in health and well-being is quite countercultural. And it's something that I really feel passionate about bringing to the Next Economy Living experience. And deepening the kind of qualitative ways in which we revalue that. And Alzheimer's and chronic disease in general, I would say, are really profound instances of this where we know a lot of science around, and of course, folks get it regardless of preventative health. So I'm not saying that this is the only thing, but we know that aging gracefully, there is a role to play in stacking the odds in your favor to prevent or stave off instances of chronic disease. But it's so hard to practice those because we have cultures that incentivize and construct us into these boxes where we need to work long hours and ignore that side of our well-being and the necessity of it, making those investments. So how do we get out of those traps? Figuring it out collectively, strategies for that is really important. That was a very long-winded way of saying that, but I hope it came across as clear. Just gonna scan to see, but Rebecca or Evangeline, are there questions that you are holding about the course or even comments or thoughts? I'd love to hear your voice.
So, hi, I'm Rebecca.
Rebecca.
I'm just on audio because I'm in the middle of moving around about my day, but wanted to be able to pop in. And I don't have a specific question, but I'm just appreciating the conversation and how the information is not just about the course, but I feel like we're getting a taste of the experience that people supporting each other with sharing different ideas. So thanks for holding this space.
Evangeline or Deborah, do you have any thoughts or questions you'd like to share? Oh, and okay, or if not, you can always pass. Mm. Mm. Well, if there's no other questions, I just want to express my really, really deep gratitude for you all joining today and your curiosity and interest. And yeah, we have one other session, a Q&A about the course in July, and then we'll move to coffee chats. So that would be another way if you want to have a one-on-one. I'll drop my email in the chat so you can reach out to me if you'd like to have a one-on-one. I'd be happy to talk about the course and how it fits in with this or any of our other offerings as well. We have an MBA course, and we also have leadership offerings where we teach nonviolent communication, and that's led by my business partner, Phoenix Soleil. And yeah, just reach out to me, reach out to each other. Yeah, let me know if there's any other questions that come up for you as you're exploring this or any of the LIFT offerings. I'd love to be in dialogue about that.
Thanks, Erin.
Thanks so much, y'all. Care, enjoy the rest of your day, and get out there for a dance break and enjoy the world outside of your house. All right, take care. Bye.